Polipede works here. So, 1063. This is good, boys. Great chapter. This is a great chapter. Okay, so from the top, we cut back to Luffy and the gang. They just finished their big meal, and this is why I'm really starting to get jazzed about Bonnie. We see Fat Bonnie. She's fat with Luffy and Chomper. This is really cool to me because we never really see a female in this light in One Piece, especially not the voracious ones. It's usually just kind of like a in love with food sort of gag. It's never saw to its conclusion. So it's really interesting to see Fat Bonnie here. It's giving me life. It's so funny. I enjoy it a lot. Okay, so here's a very rare moment where I'm picking up on the Jinbei humor, though it's super, super dry, which is funny because he's a fish that uses water to attack. But regardless, Atlas makes a comment about their four bulging bellies, and he's like, well, I was already like that. That's good humor. That's good. I like that bit of humor there. That's top shelf. Good work. Good stuff there. Okay, apparently there is a clothing fabricator on Egghead Island, and we get this new space age fit for everyone in Luffy's group, but Jinbei. Here's okay, real talk. Okay, Bonnie first of all looks fantastic in it, and I guess she's kind of got the what is that term? It's a term in which you use all the calories at your disposal immediately, so she gets thin immediately along with Luffy and Chomper. That could be because of her powers, or it could be that she has that weird energy conservation thing, or that energy usage thing that Luffy has. It shows up every once in a while, like it showed up in Whole Cake Island when he ate all of Cracker's soldiers. About that, flipping back a little bit to the cover story, Pudding has been captured, and I'm still not sure if Chocolate Town is covered in ice or is it Shino Kuni Bomb, because it could be both. Also, Cracker has been defeated. That's what made me actually remember when I brought up Cracker's abilities there. Cracker has been defeated, and Brulee is in woe because Pudding has been captured. Now, I've been talking to some people about this. The Alchemist's Razor answer to me is that it's Kuzan, and that he went to Chocolate Town to capture Pudding, because that's her like base of operations, right? So it makes sense for it to be Kuzan. However, what makes me sort of on the fence about things is that Caesar's there, and we know Caesar can do something akin to freezing people with the Shirokuni gas thing they did on Punk Hazard, and we know he kind of fused with it, so he might have some in his reserves, or he may just be able to make it on the fly. Don't know, but it's really interesting. But I'm thinking, if not the coming week with 1064, it'll be with 1065 that we see a conclusion as to who's causing this sort of freezing effect. Could be Kuzan, could be a Caesar Clown thing. But then again, too, it promotes the thought, what would the Germo want with Pudding? It could be a revenge thing, but that doesn't really line up for me. But we'll see. We'll see. Getting back to the chopper proper, clothing fabricator. Everybody in Luffy's group gets a new sort of space age fit, but Jinbei. And I find this a very interesting dilemma about Jinbei specifically, because no matter what the subject matter we're talking about or what medium we're talking about with One Piece, whether it's the manga or like a movie, he always kind of has a similar fit to his original fit. This isn't true for everyone else, because everyone has gone wildly off the grid from their key design. Like, Brooke has like several different styles of clothing. He's been a hippie, he's been an Arabian Night sort of look, he's been a punk rocker, he's gone in multiple directions. Same with Frankie. It's just with Jinbei, it's like he has this Hawaiian shirt now, what looks like a skirt deal, or like his robe, his Jinbei, because that's the joke. The robe is called a Jinbei, and his name is Jinbei because he's a whale shark. I think Jinbei is the Japanese word for whale shark, but it's also like a robe, like I think it's akin to a karate gi, but it's different. Maybe it's for practicing jujitsu. Not sure on that. But the point of the matter is that I think here, when the fabricator gave him a fit, it's sort of like folded over his robe that he had on previously into like a skirt deal, and then he has his Hawaiian shirt on top. Which again, a printed shirt is not a far cry from what he's been wearing since we've known him since like Impel Down. So I don't know. That's kind of weird to me. Though, here's the interesting part. We get a RoboCop reference because the gang is spotted by a cop version of Kuma who is patrolling around. We also see that there are also like little guys around this sort of egghead laboratory. So Bonnie sees them as supposed lab assistants. They could be, or they could be like lesser clones of Vegapunk. Not sure, because we also see a little earlier on there was a hologram. I mean, back in like 1062, there was a hologram of someone who had P25 on their dress. It was a hologram of a girl who had P25 on her dress. So to that, I say I don't know. However, RoboCop Kuma is kind of sick. I'm digging it. I'm digging it a lot. So they go to attack RoboCop Kuma because he spots them. Big explosion. Everyone goes flying. Luffy gears up for a elephant gun. That's what it looks like. Bonnie drop kicks him, which is very interesting. And then when she drop kicks him, we get to hear Luffy call her by name again. So he didn't call her Bogey. He called her Bonnie. Remember, Luffy takes names very seriously. So that's just an interesting development. If the person that he really cares about is present, he makes sure to call them by name and not by like some sort of shorthand. He never called Law. It's always Traffy or something like that. So, or Tora guy, I think it's said in some translations. So yeah, that's kind of sick that he keeps calling her by her first name. And it seems like Bonnie has some PTSD about anything that even remotely looks like her father, Kuma, which makes a lot of sense based on what I said in 1062 about her crying during the War of the Best being broadcasted in Shabandi Archipelago. When she was crying about that because she saw how her father was replicating, and she knows how she was taken advantage of by Vegapunk. So we get a kind of a I want to live moment with Bonnie here, where she's crying over the visage of her father in front of her and knowing that's not him. This is very deep psychological stuff. I like it though. It's very interesting. It makes her more of a complex character. And now, what's really interesting is that we see a little glimpse of what Kuma looked like before, I guess, becoming the tyrant. This could be even like early revolutionary member stuff, okay? And what's interesting about him here, it looks like he's wearing glasses, which makes sense because his eyes look like glasses as far as we've known him. And since he's holding his daughter with bare hands, bare hands, I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. It's funny though. I'm sorry. Since we see him holding his daughter with his bare hands, I'm assuming this is pre-Paw Fruit, which is super interesting because we have never seen this before with Kuma. We've never seen a Paw Fruit Kuma. And he looks smaller here, which I'm wondering, is the muscle mass and like the weird like upper body, small lower body thing all cybernetic stuff? Or is he like Burgess and just went to the gym post Paw Fruit? Something to think about. But I do like Bonnie crying over him here. It's very sad. It's very interesting. I'm really liking Bonnie as a character. She's really turning around and rounding out. So Luffy runs for her because she's just in a puddle of grief, and then we see a big explosion, and then we cut away. Now, when we cut away, we go to a certain sea in the New World, and Mr. Ziha is on the prowl. What's interesting is that we see his ship. What's interesting about this is that we see Conqueror's hockey bolts coming out of the ocean, which from what happens next, I'm assuming it's Law. Speaking of Law, hey yo, wait a minute. Okay, speaking of Law, right? Remember when I told you, pay attention to all that SBS stuff? Well, here's another factor in that because we see a female Law, and it's exactly as he looked in that SBS question. So yes, pay attention to SBS trivia. If it seems dumb and unimportant is probably very important. It's gonna show up somewhere. Yeah, Law is looking like a baddie, not gonna lie about it. And it's the result of a contagious disease brought on by Doc Q. And it's afflicted the entire crew, because we see a very funny female Beppo and a female Sachi and Penguin. Well, male Sachi, no, excuse me, male Penguin, because I see the hat. Male Penguin, who is then infected by the contagious disease afflicted by a female Sachi. And then Law has had enough of it, and supposedly he brings up from his time in fighting Kaido and Big Mom that, like how Kaido and Big Mom anchored themselves with Haki so that he couldn't displace them with his room, you can actually use Haki to remove afflictions, like the affliction Doc Q has placed on Law here. This is super interesting because now this really kind of rounds out how Belfry users such as Bonnie, for example, probably wouldn't be able to afflict stronger opponents with her ability, because they could actually just hockey up and break out of it. One thing that was brought up in the synopsis of this chapter on Reddit that I saw is that Law is emitting white lightning. So I'm not sure if that's another weird mistake, like with the pacifista Seraphim Kuma having black hair in the previous chapter. It was supposed to have white hair. This could be one of those times, because I do think the hockey bolts coming out of the ocean are from Law, but we'll see. I mean, it has to be, because I mean, we see him having such a big hockey bloom after his fight with Big Mom and Kaido, so that's most likely the case. Okay, now we get to the meat and the potatoes of the conversation. Doc Q comes up, and we are introduced to his new devil fruit, which is called the Sick fruit. And Doc Q explains how antibodies are a bit of an issue for his ability, because once antibodies are found out, a cure can be concocted, and the disease will be null and void. He describes what he afflicted Law and his crew with as the Milady disease. It'll probably be a little different in the official translation, but that's a very funny description. I like it. Okay, so then we see Burgess and Doc Q. Doc Q is described to have the warp fruit. And when I saw this, brother, this has huge narrative implications. You don't understand how big that is. We can talk about this more in depth in another video, but if he is Usopp's final opponent, this means Usopp literally has to hit an unhittable man. That's big. That's a big development. That's so sick, my guy. That's so cool. That's so cool. And it's a better version of Kuma's fruit, because Kuma's fruit just pushes things at the speed of light. He seems to actually blink out of existence with a passenger and pop into another location. What's interesting about Burgess here is that Sabo messed him up pretty bad. Pretty good. He messed him up good, because it seems like half his face is now cybernetic. So he's a cyborg now, which his cyborg look is kind of killer. I'm digging it. And on the subject of Burgess, he has something called the buff fruit. Now, when Raws were coming out, this was translated as the Riki no Mi, which I looked it up. Riki, R-I-K-I, just means strength or like leader. So buff fruit, depending on how Biz wants to translate it, I think that's a pretty good translation, buff. With the buff fruit, by the way, I'm wondering who actually gave him these cybernetics, who fixed his face. Because it probably wasn't Doc Q, because it seems like a shipwright sort of field of expertise. And let me remind you, Burgess is not a shipwright. Burgess is a helmsman. Burgess is the same thing to the Blackbeard pirates, supposedly, as Jinbei is to the Straw Hats. Okay, so who actually gave him the new face? I'm thinking it was Vala Pizarro, because he does have those weird gauntlets, so he could technically be the shipwright, but that needs a bit more of an explanation. And I find it very clean that this is like the original crew. This is the original Blackbeard pirates attacking Law. Kind of sick. Law describes their powers as super strength, bizarre contagions, and teleportation. So yeah, which also very sick narrative thing for Doc Q. Chomper. Now, if this is indeed Chomper's final opponent, or at least his opponent on the Blackbeard crew, Chomper now has to find cures for diseases on the spot during their fight. This is coming close to being a dream fulfillment thing, I think. Because what better way to cure all diseases than to actually fight someone who can pull diseases out of the ether on a moment's notice? This is good narrative stuff. I can see it down the tunnel. This is going to be sick. It's going to be the sickest stuff you've ever seen. I'm hyped. This is cool. But you know what? Mr. Ziaha is always bringing it. I love Blackbeard. He's so cool. His career is so cool. Good stuff. Okay, so Burgess throws a mountain on the Heart Pirates. Law counters a room. And then we see Blackbeard flying in. What is he flying in on, boys? He's flying in on Stronger and on Doc Q by extension. Which is hilarious. Because he can't hold him up because Blackbeard is too fat. That's so good. Okay. Here's the funny part about Stronger specifically. This is the first time since the character's existence, period, that he's ever got an introduction box. When you see him in Jaya, he's the only one that doesn't get one. He is ignored pretty thoroughly throughout his entire existence until now. What's also very interesting about his fruit, he is a Pegasus fruit. So if you watch my hybrid Zoan video, I'm kind of getting blown out here because I was wrong. I'll admit that I was wrong because I was thinking that Peri was going to be our Pegasus for the series. But after doing some research on a Pegasus after the Raws came out and the spoilers came out, I did look up what a Pegasus origins were in Greek mythology. And a Pegasus is sort of like its own thing, like a unicorn is. Because at the end of that video, I mentioned a unicorn. Take a gander, it's a good video. So at the end of that video, I mentioned a unicorn. And I was waiting to see whether if Stronger was like a legit Pegasus or that weird like unicorn Pegasus combination thing you see sometimes. I think, but this is a really weird reference, but if you're familiar with the My Little Pony cartoon that came out in 2010, I think, they called that combination an alicorn. So I don't know if that's the official name for it, but Stronger's not that, but he did get stronger. Also, kind of a blowout on the Stronger video, because I was dead set on him having a human fruit, which I'm still open to the possibility that there could be other human fruits out there, but him having a Pegasus fruit is very important. So important that I'm going to make a whole another video about Stronger specifically, because I have been a champion for Stronger for a long time, but him having a Pegasus fruit and that Pegasus fruit being a horse fruit and a mythical Zoan is very, very important to Devil Fruit lore, I think. And I'm going to make a big video about that after this one. But yeah, Blackbeard's too heavy because he's fat. That's so funny. But yeah, now it's a showdown between Teach and Law for the Roll Poneglyph rubbings. So here's the interesting part. Oh, also, thankfully, no break next week. We're good. So here's a very interesting thing about Law fighting Blackbeard. If you recall, I do not remember where this is said. It's probably said in some ancient SBS. Oda said a while ago, this is probably like 10 years ago, 10, 20 maybe, that once you see the character with an actual eye patch, you're halfway through the story. So, if there was ever a character to give Blackbeard that type of injury, it would be Law. I think it would be Law. Because it fixed Blackbeard's aesthetic too good. And he's the only current Yonko that doesn't have like a weird thing going on with his face. For example, Law has a scar. Not Law. Shanks has the scar. Luffy has a scar. And Buggy has his red nose. By proxy, Teach is the most normal looking one of these four currently. So I think it would be very interesting that this confrontation most likely ends in a tie, even though it's kind of 4 against 1 because, okay, let's be real. What are the goobers on the Heart Pirates going to do? Not a thing, because Blackbeard originals are too good. But okay, it's super interesting now because I think we can go that way. But we'll only probably see the results of this fight at the end of Egghead, whatever they may be. Though I don't think Law's dying. Do I think Law's dying? Do I think Blackbeard's going to force him to give him the Eternal Life Surgery or whatever like that? No, I don't. I think the Eternal Life Surgery is on the table as a plot point. It's a very Chekhov's gun sort of thing. It's got to happen at some point. Do I think that that's going to happen here? Most likely not. Do I think Law's going to get power snatched? Most likely not, because Dark Q is sort of like the antithesis of all doctors right now. So that's gonna probably just stay for Chomper. And man, I can make a whole video about that. Jeez. I don't necessarily think Law's gonna die in this confrontation. I don't. He's too popular. I know we like to say popularity doesn't matter, but if he was like a doodle on a napkin or just like a weird afterthought along with the rest of these worst generation guys, then, well, obviously besides Blackbeard and Zoro and Luffy, obviously. But if he was an afterthought and he's gotten this prominent, I don't think he's going anywhere. I do find it funny that we can't escape Law, because it kind of feels like Ace was not replaced by Sabo, but he was replaced by Law, because he's very much the cool guy that's taking the spotlight, and he's been in the majority of the time skip in this entire saga, basically. And this entire sort of Kaido saga has been the bulk of what the time skip has been so far. So yeah, I don't think he's dying, but I do think if there was ever a confrontation for Blackbeard to be permanently injured and need an eye patch, it would be this one. Just putting it out there. But yeah, that's what I'm calling it. Could be wrong though. But that's what I'm saying. Otherwise, really cool chapter. It really feels like Burgess is shaping up to be a Frankie opponent as opposed to a Jinbei opponent, because I would even say still Jinbei would wash him. He would wash him so easily, but we have to see what his buff fruit actually does, because in terms of abilities in One Piece, it's very interesting that technically there are two that give you super strength, and it's very interesting for this type of series in general, because super strength can be so easily attained by just basically working out. You kind of see what I'm saying? Like, for example, Kobe was just your regular run-of-the-mill villager, and then he got to a point where he's a superhuman marine that can do 6 power stuff on the fly. That's why I'm saying it's a little interesting. Also, what's interesting, where is Kobe? Now that I say that, because he was kidnapped by Blackbeard, so we don't really know what's going on with that. That's an interesting story for another time. But yeah, I don't know what this buff fruit is entailing. The last worst generation member that we need to cover is Urouge, and Urouge is sort of proposed to have a kind of super strength and enhancer fruit that's based off of karma, just based on what we've seen him do in video games and how his techniques are translated. So that's something to watch out for whenever Urouge comes up, because I think is it Urouge or Rouge? Rouge. So we'll see when Rouge comes up, but yeah, that's something to look out for, and I'm kind of interested to see what Burgess's buff fruit actually does, because that's a very interesting power to have. What are the limits, and is this lifting a mountain just sort of him doing it casually, or is he actually pushing his devil fruit to the limit? A lot of people were saying, now that I remember, that he had this fruit back in Dressrosa. That can't be the case. That has to be after he found out where the revolutionaries were hiding out. I think it has to be after that, because he was actually hunting for Luffy's Gum fruit at that time. And of course, he was in the tournament to get the Flare fruit. So if he was in a tournament to get a fruit, why would he even be there if he had one already? And then why would he then hunt for another one when getting that fell through? It doesn't make sense. So I think this devil fruit obtainment is a recent development for Burgess. I don't think he's always had that. Nor do I think multiple members of the Blackbeard Pirates can have too. I think that's really a specific thing that only Blackbeard can have. Probably most likely because of the Yami fruit, the darkness fruit. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Polipede Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription.